Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is training, and we're going to cover 5 things you're probably doing wrong. So these are things I often see people making the mistake of while they're working out, and they are things that are absolutely 100% contributing to them not getting the best results out of their efforts. So I thought this would be a fun one to kind of go through. It's a little bit general in the sense of I'm going to introduce the 5 things to you, give you a little bit of tips, and then hope that you can look back through it on your own training. So maybe not like as super detailed as explaining a very specific kind of training technique or something, but I think these general ones are very helpful because they help hit like kind of more people, obviously, because more people can use the information. But it also kind of sparks some introspective thought and kind of looks into your own training. So too often people kind of like bounce around from program to program and they wonder why they're not getting results. And it isn't really the program's problem as much as it is the way that you're executing the program. So what I'm going to tell you in today's podcast will help make any program, any training style more effective. Okay? So let's look at the first one. The first one we have is a proper warm-up. So overwhelmingly, most people do not warm up appropriately. So the young crowd, which I used to be in, so they'll come into the gym and they want to say bench press for the day. So they're in their teens, early 20s. They're idiots. Their joints don't hurt yet. So they just come into the gym, bullshit with some friends, lay down on the bench and start going. Then as you get a little bit older, in your 30s and 40s, all of a sudden you're like, damn it, my elbow kind of bugs me. I got to do something to warm this up before I start moving. Then when you're 50s and 60s, you probably are going to not even bench press at all because you'll say you're too old for it. Okay, so that's some of the pattern that people go through. And there is truth to the younger crowd. If they were to take more time and warm up, they'd probably hold on to the longevity of their joints better. The middle crowd, typically what they're doing to warm up isn't a full, complete addressing everything that needs to be addressed type of warm up. And then the older crowd doesn't know how to warm up appropriately to actually get their body feeling good to move. So there is kind of one big concern around 2 things that I look for in a proper warm up. There's actually many more, but I'm going to kind of shorten it for this podcast. Is a proper warm up. Well, I'm going to go ahead and add something to it already. So a proper warm-up should help address weaknesses, so known weaknesses. So if I know in a bench press, for example, that my elbow always hurts after I bench press, well, maybe there's something wrong with the positioning of your upper back. So typically, if somebody's having an elbow pain during bench press or after bench press, there might be something wrong with this shoulder blade placement they have on the bench. Maybe they're not pinching their shoulder blades together and pushing their chest up towards the ceiling and making a good, tight kind of scapular retraction, which is giving them a nice, strong base. So they want to go ahead and do that. So it should look like you're almost performing a row, like a cable row, like a seated cable row, where you pull the shoulders back and pinch them together to finish out the row. You should have your shoulders pulled back and your shoulder blades pinched together when you bench press. Another thing might be somebody's hand position isn't correct. So their hand position is either too narrow or too wide, or they're trying to touch too low on their chest and then bring like the bar up over their face. There's like different pathways that are appropriate per person's body type. So basically they could just be benching with bad setup and or in a type of bench press that doesn't match their body type. So that's one thing to look of. When you warm up, it should be something that if you find out or if you think you have a problem with shoulder blades being pinched together, for example, in a bench press, you can warm up doing cable rows, like back exercises, and actually get your back warmed up and practice that position before you bench press. So that's one thing with proper warm-ups is they should have a rhyme and a reason to them. Not just, oh, go into the gym, move shit around, and then start benching. There should be some type of focused intent in your warm-up, and there should be some type of progressive nature, meaning you're hoping to get better at whatever your warm-up is over time. The other thing is your warm-up has to actually be difficult. So too many people go through a fluffy warm-up and then they wonder why things still hurt when they go into the bigger movements. So a proper warm-up should burn. The muscles you're targeting in your warm-up should burn. You should be uncomfortable. You should start sweating. And one of the main reasons why this is important is it starts the production of two important hormones. One is adrenaline and one is endorphins. So as we go through a painful kind of muscular burning warm-up, so if you think of you getting on like a CrossFit rower and rowing for 3 minutes as fast and aggressive as you can, 3 minutes is enough time to piss off your whole body. So the joints are going to, and I mean in the good way, is it's going to start making you sweat. It's going to start making blood flow. It's going to start just making your body work. So you're going to get done with those 3 minutes. You're going to be out of breath. Things are going to be burning, and you're going to be happy the 3 minutes are over. But 3 minutes of a rower isn't enough to make it that you can't do anything else in your workout. So you're not going to do 3 minutes of a rower and then lay on the floor for 40 minutes throwing up, hopefully. So it's a level of difficulty that challenges you but doesn't crush you. The reason why that's important is if it's difficult, if it hurts a little bit, if it challenges you, you will start to produce adrenaline, which is natural kind of aggressiveness towards like lifting weights. And what this means is it's going to get your aggression up, it's going to get your excitement up, your CNS, your nervous system. You're just going to feel more ready to lift weights. You're going to feel more awake. And that kind of helps get you more excited and kind of prepare you for the mental and physical state that you would need to be in for your bigger lifts. The other aspect is it starts to produce endorphins, which are natural painkillers. So that way, by the time you go to the big lift, your body's kind of flying high, it's feeling good, everything feels nice and smooth, and you don't notice any little aches and pains. So you can kind of go through the main lift feeling better. So I remember over all the years of my various injuries I've had, that sometimes the only part of the day that I actually felt good was when I was working out, because my body was producing endorphins and adrenaline, and it actually made me feel good. So compared to the rest of the time of the day when I was in pain due to like this whatever the injury would have been. So there was a period of time where I had back pain all day, every day for 14 months due to an injury. So the only time I felt good was when I worked out. So I remember like back then my workouts would take 2 or 3 hours because it was the only time I felt good. I just never wanted to quit working out. So a proper warm-up is something that most people don't do correctly, and it's something that, if done correctly, can help you get better results out of your programming, no matter what your training is. So you want to have a warm-up that addresses a known weakness and make sure it's progressive over time so you get better at that thing. So make sure it's more than just coming in, fluffing around, moving things. Make sure what you do actually has a reason for you doing it. The other thing is make sure what you do challenges you. Doesn't crush you and wear you out, but it definitely challenges you. So that way you can start producing adrenaline and endorphins, and the rest of your workout is going to go a lot better. So that's the first thing. The second thing we have that most people mess up is they don't have the correct time under tension for their goal. So in podcast number 214, we discuss rep ranges and expected results. One of the number one problems with programs is it's either in the fault of the programmer or in the fault of the person doing the program, aka you. So is they might have a rep range listed that they believe coincides with an expected result. However, the rep range that it takes, like the time it takes to achieve those reps, is not correctly matching what they want to happen. So I'm going to run through some numbers and then explain this in more detail. So I'm going to give you some of the numbers of that podcast number 214, but if you like the idea of what I'm about to mention here in the next like 5 minutes and you want to learn more about it, go listen to podcast number 214. So, in general, time under tension is what dictates results, not reps. What this means is, if I do bicep curls to grow bigger biceps, there is a time under tension of weight that if I reach muscular failure, the body's response will be to grow bigger muscle, assuming I have appropriate sleep and food. So if I want bigger biceps, there's an appropriate time under tension in which I should lift the dumbbells, if you're doing dumbbell curls, that if I fail in a certain time, I know for a fact muscular growth is going to be the response. There is a different time under tension that if I fail at that time under tension, I know for a fact the response would be muscular endurance, not muscular growth. And there's also a time frame related to strength, where my biceps will get stronger, but they might not necessarily get bigger, and they absolutely won't get more endurance. So I can do bicep curls, and I can either get stronger biceps, I can get bigger biceps, or I can get better endurance to biceps. And there are some blends in between. But all of those outcomes are dictated by time under tension, not specifically rep ranges. What I mean by this is typically the ranges of time that I'm going to go through here. I'm going to blitz through them really quick. And again, you can look at podcast 214 for more updates on this, like more detail. So 0 to 10 seconds of time under tension for an exercise is mostly how you test the strength of that movement. So if I wanted to test to see how strong my biceps were, I would do a set of muscular failure of a weight so heavy that it would cause me to fail between 0 and 10 seconds. Obviously, 0 is not really an option, so it should be 1 to 10 seconds. But something about 10 seconds or less is really just testing my strength. It's not even enough time or attention to really start building strength, and definitely not enough to build muscle, and certainly not enough to build endurance. So if I only do something for 1 second, that doesn't really build endurance. That's kind of common sense, right? So if I do an activity, so bicep curls, for example, for up to 10 seconds, so 10 seconds or less, it doesn't matter whether that takes me 10 reps, 3 reps, 7 reps, 1 rep. If I do 1 rep of 10 seconds or 10 reps of 1 second, it's all going to be within 10 seconds or less. That means it's all going to be within more so testing my strength rather than building my strength. So if I do a set of 8 of bicep curls, but it only takes me 8 seconds, that is not bodybuilding. That is not muscular growth, even though we commonly think a set of 8 would build muscle. It's not the number of reps you do that matters, it's the time under tension that matters. So your program might be written for specific reps, but you're either moving too fast or too slow, and you're not getting the right results. Or the person programmed the wrong number of reps for the results that you want. So if I want to build strength and the person programmed 20 reps, it's probably going to take me an inappropriate time under tension range, of getting 20 reps in of a certain exercise. So think of 20 reps of squats. That could damn near take a minute because you're having a heart attack while you're doing it, and squats take a second or two to actually complete. So it's not a movement that can be done in 1 second. If you could squat down and up in 1 second, that's amazing. So even if you don't have any weight on your body. So if you're doing sets of 20 and thinking that's building strength, it absolutely 100% is not. So you have to make sure your time under tension matches your goal. So again, for example, 0 to 10 seconds is testing strength. Activities done to failure, not just stopping, but actual muscular failure of 10 to 20 seconds is building strength. 20 to 30 seconds is kind of heavy muscle manipulation, meaning muscle building or muscle kind of shaping, depending on your nutrition. So that's the heavy kind of bodybuilder or body shaping type movements, is movements that take 20 to 30 seconds to complete. 30 to 40 seconds is kind of like a medium level of difficulty of weight load. And then 40 to 60 seconds is a lightweight load. The reason why this is important to know is heavy muscle manipulation, heavy stuff for 20 to 30 seconds usually has the best degree of muscle damage, but it also damages joints. So you have to be careful of how much of that you do. Mediumly loaded stuff for muscle manipulation, muscle growth, or muscle shape in 30 to 40 seconds is usually a pretty good blend of muscle damage and not that hard on the joints. 40 to 60 seconds is a lower level of muscle damage, but it's super friendly on the joints. So it kind of depends on your joint health and how much joint stress you want from that specific movement. Depends on whether you'd load it in the heavy, medium, or the light range. Then, activities of 60 seconds or more is pretty much muscular endurance. You're not going to get strength out of that. You're probably not going to get any muscular growth because it's not heavy enough to actually damage the tissues to cause growth. So it's more so muscular endurance. So understanding the time under tensions and their relations to the specific goals that they'll elicit allows you to know if your program is written correctly for your goals and or if you are performing the exercises at the correct speed for your goals, given the rep range that you have prescribed to you. So if you have something for 10 reps and it's meant to build muscle, that should take anywhere from 20 to 60 seconds, and I would argue more so 20 to 40 seconds. So this stuff does get somewhat complicated But the simplistic way of thinking of this is if we know 0 to 10 seconds is testing strength, but I'm doing that exercise with the intent of building muscle, I'm not doing it at the correct speed. I need to pay attention to my time under tension, and I need to pay attention to the speed of my movement, the quality of my movement. So this leads into the third thing that everyone messes up, which is muscle intention versus movement intention. So are you doing the exercise to feel the muscle related to the exercise working, or are you doing the exercise to become good at that movement? So am I doing a bicep curl because I want to become the most efficient bicep curler in the world? No. I'm doing a bicep curl because I hope it beats up my biceps and makes them either bigger or better shaped. So if I'm doing bicep curls, I need to make sure my focus is on the muscles, not on the movement. Whereas, if I'm trying to do, like, say, conventional deadlift max, 1 rep max, I don't necessarily want to feel any specific muscle because it's tearing off the bone that I'd be feeling it. You more so want to focus on the quality of the movement. Can I move efficiently, and can I have all the muscles involved work in the correct pathways, timing, and correct manner? So the focus or the intention or the intent is more so on the actual movement rather than on a specific muscle. So podcast number 220 explains this in more detail. But too often when people are trying to build or shape muscle, they should be using a muscular focused intention. However, they're just kind of throwing the weights around and going through the movement, just kind of wanting to get to the number. So if the rep range is 14, they just want to get to 14 before the hurt becomes too much. Well, that hurt is what's actually eliciting the results that you want. It's what's going to allow you to actually change the muscle. So you want to soak yourself into the hurt. You want to kind of embrace that. Don't run away from it. So the intention should be on muscular damage. That's what you want to focus on if your result is muscular related, your desired result. If your desired result is strength related, then you want to focus on the movement. If your muscular result is endurance due to efficiency, then again you want to focus on the movement. So depending on what your desired outcome is, should then dictate what type of intention or focus you perform that exercise with. So you need to make sure that you're focusing either on the muscles or on the movement as specific to what your desired outcome is. So hopefully that's helpful. And again, that's podcast number 220 if you want to learn more about that. The next one we have is paying attention to rest times and transition times from one exercise to another. So rest times, so if I do a set and I'm supposed to rest for 1 minute, that is specifically written for a reason, hopefully. Otherwise, your programmer is a dumbass and they're not paying attention. So your rest times should be specific to what the intent of that movement is and the intent of the results of your training. So rest time, for example, it contributes to the intensity of a workout. So sometimes people will go through a workout and they'll say, oh, this wasn't really that hard. It didn't feel like it was enough. But yet they took 2 to 3 times the rest that they should have taken. So the factor of the speed on which they were supposed to do the workout was lessened. Therefore, the workout itself felt lessened. Whereas if they had followed the exact rest times, the intensity of the workout would have felt higher and the amount of work would have been appropriate. So rest time contributes to intensity of the workout. So think of it, if I gave you 10 exercises with only 10 seconds rest in between, that's going to feel miserable compared to 10 exercises with 10 minutes of rest in between. I know that's an extreme example, but it shows you that there is a difference. So you need to adhere to proper rest times if they're given to you, because they should be factored into the difficulty and the intensity of the training. Another thing that rest times contribute to is your cardiovascular effect of a workout. So often when you work with my clients, we use weight training as a form of cardio. So we've talked about in podcast number 30 titled Muscle Cardio, How to Lose Fat Without Losing Muscle, is when you use weight training in interval circuit style. It helps you lose body fat, it helps you improve cardiovascular health, but it helps you also maintain muscle mass. So overwhelmingly, the clients I work with never do more than 20 minutes of cardio at a time. We very rarely do steady state cardio, just boring on a treadmill or step mill for an hour or so. We never really do anything over 20 minutes. The reason why is it's absolutely proven fact that it's without drug aid that interval cardio and short bursts of cardio are more helpful for fat loss while retaining muscle mass than long bouts of cardio. If somebody is taking exogenous, like outside of their body source, testosterone, then it doesn't matter as much because they have some protection on the muscle and they can do some things that are maybe more detrimental to muscle mass and not have to worry. So, however, over time, they're still going to run into negative downsides of metabolism slowing down unless they're taking, like, T3 and some other supplements they shouldn't be taking. So it kind of depends on the drug arsenal a person has. The more drugs they take, the more stupid they can train. However, the more, if they do and train intelligently, they can get better results out of those drugs. So, a little side riff there. But the rest times that you use in workouts contribute to heart rate pacing. And they can contribute to the amount of caloric burn within a specific time, which then has residual effects on caloric burn during the recovery phase. So if somebody is not taking appropriate rest times, they will kind of lessen the cardiovascular effect of their workout. They'll lessen the fat loss effect of that workout. So it's important to take rest times to make sure you're getting the cardiovascular effects that you want. Last thing is consistency of effort. So if I do one set, like say I'm doing 3 sets of an exercise, in between sets 1 and 2, I take a 1-minute break. Then between sets 2 and 3, I BS with a friend, I have taken a 5-minute break. You will perform differently from set to set to set because of the rest times. So maybe set 1, you did a really good weight that felt appropriately challenging. By set 2, since you took a really short rest, all of a sudden it feels way too hard, and you don't feel like you fully recovered. But then if you talk with your friend, you take a 5-minute break, you come back to that exact same weight in set 3, and all of a sudden it's too easy. So you don't have the correct consistency of stimulus out of the working sets because you didn't have consistency in your rest times. So rest times and transition times from one movement to another are all very important and should be controlled and should be kind of accounted for in your training. So that's something that a lot of people don't pay attention to, but it has an enormous effect on the effects of your training. The last one we want to look at is one of the things that most people do wrong is they don't have a balanced training in their overall. So they're focusing too much on the things they're good at, not enough on the things they're not good at. They're also just not paying attention to whole big components of training. So I have a list of 3 things here that are kind of component focus points. There are more, but this kind of gets you something to think of. So in your training, you should do something to address strength. It doesn't matter what the hell your goal is, even if you want to be like a 100-mile cyclist. So it still is very, very, very important to be strong. So strength kind of gives your body what you're going to be pulling away from. So say I actually did want to cycle 100 miles. Well, how much does my body have to give towards that 100 miles? The stronger you are, the more your body has to give to it. So if I'm only 3 units strong, I have to spread out 3 units over 100 miles. If I train and I become 5 units strong, I now have 5 units of strength that I can thin out over 100 miles. So the stronger I am, the more effective it is for training, whether it's strength-based training, obviously, muscle building, or endurance-based. Now, there is a degree of diminishing returns. If I'm 90 units strong, and I train like a psychopath, and I devote myself to strength training so much so that it takes away from the quality of my cycling training, just so I can get to 95 units strong. Is there really much significance between 90 and 95? Not really, especially if it downgraded the specific training I need for my specific activity. So there is a diminishing returns aspect, but in general, strength is extremely important. People need to be paying attention to strength. You also need to pay attention to muscle manipulation, which is muscle building and muscle shaping. The more balanced your muscles are along your joints, the less joint stress you're going to have. So regardless of what your activity is, whether it's a strength, bodybuilding, or endurance sport, the more balanced your musculature is around a joint, the more healthy that joint will be. And then also endurance-based training. So even for somebody who does pure strength, endurance is important. Cardiovascular health, cardiovascular endurance, factors into your recovery in between sets and in between workouts. If you have a better cardiovascular health, you can recover better between sets, you can recover better between workouts, and you can actually get better strength-based results. Now, again, there's a diminishing return. So you need enough cardiovascular health to maximize your strength training, but you don't need to go out there and be able to run 100 miles, okay? But strength versus muscle manipulation versus endurance is one set of balances that you need to have in your training. Another set is big movements versus small movements. So too often powerlifters and strength-based people do too large of movements. Just squat, bench, deadlift, squat, bench, deadlift, squat, bench, deadlift. And they develop all these weird imbalances, all these small weaknesses around their joints that don't show up until a little bit later, but then all of a sudden they have to do a bunch of small movements to correct that. So if they would have had a balance of big movements and small movements, they would have already been addressing that from the very beginning. Another thing you look for is people who want to come in and just make, like, I just want to be a little healthier, get a little better shape of my muscles, and, have good heart health. Well, they'll tend to do too small of movements. They shy away from squat, bench, and deadlift or overhead press. They shy away from big movements. And what happens is you can only get so much of a degree of stimulus from small movements that they end up having to use, 10, 12, 14, 16, maybe even 20 small movements to just do what one big-ass movement could have done. So it's inefficiency of training. If they learn the big movement how to do it correctly, and they can do so to protect their joints, they can accomplish more results in the same amount of time, or accomplish the same results in faster time by blending big movements with their small movements. Another balance we have is body usage in training. So there's kind of like one list of things. The guy name is Dan John. I don't really have anything like a great resource for you to go. But if you Google Dan John on YouTube, you'll, I guess you don't Google on YouTube. You know what I mean. So search for the name Dan John and you can find him. He's an exercise guy. And he has a set of 5 things that he thinks should be in every training. And the first one is squat, which actually is defined as like a knee bend activity. You have hinge, which is a hip bend activity. You then have push exercises, you have pull exercises, and you have core exercises. So there should be a knee bending activity, a hip bending activity, a push, a pull, and a core. So for example, walking lunges is a knee bend, whereas stiff-legged deadlifts is a hip bend. So you should have both those, like hip thrust, that's a hip bend. So you should have a knee-based activity and you should have a hip-based activity for your lower body. Somewhere in your programming. It doesn't all have to be in the same day, but it should be addressed per week, absolutely. You should then have pushing exercises and in both planes of motion, horizontal and vertical, meaning you should have like chest presses, push-ups, bench press, stuff like that, where your arms are moving perpendicular to your body. You should also have overhead presses, where your arms are moving parallel to your body in a pushing fashion. You should then have pulling exercises, again, in both planes of motion, so rows and pull-ups and pull-downs. Rows are vertical, perpendicular, and pull-ups and pull-downs are parallel with your body. And then you should have something for core, and that could be bracing activities, anti-rotation, it can be rotation, it can be crunching, it can be planks, blah, 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 blah. But your training should address a knee bend, a hip bend, a push in both planes, a pull in both planes, and core. So that's 7 things, technically, that your training should have in them for you to have a balanced physique. So, and this is balanced strength, and typically if you get all these in, you're going to have pretty good joint health as well because you have balance around your joints. So those are just 3 things to think of: strength versus muscle manipulation versus endurance, balance, a balance of big movements versus small movements, then a balance of knee bends, hip bends, pushes in both planes, pulls in both planes, and core activities. So your training should address all of that to make sure you have a balance in your training. This might seem overwhelming, okay? So what I really wanted to do is introduce these ideas. Maybe out of these 5 ideas, so warm-ups, time under tensions, muscle versus movement intention, rest times, and balanced training, maybe out of one of those 5 you recognize a flaw in your training. So dive deeper into that. look into a little more detail and see if you can make some corrections or changes or kind of tighten up on what you do. It'll help you get better results out of what you're already doing. So you don't need to look to do more in your training. You typically just need to look to do better. So instead of adding quantity, you need to add quality. That is overwhelmingly the most concern for most people. Just do what you're already doing better. That helps. Cool. So hopefully this gave you some food for thought. Hopefully it gave you some things that you can kind of look into your own training and get better results out of what you're already doing. It'll make you happier because you'll actually see results out of what you're doing. And maybe that'll motivate you to do even more over long term. Cool. So if you like this podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. And if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is for you, so we'll know what you want to learn about. And you can tell us at our email, brutalironGym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.